only to collapse. This declaration, which I read in an essay from The Economist titled, "What's Gone Wrong with Democracy," is one I completely agree with. Simply put, democracy does not succeed very often. Even in countries that are democratic, you can find people and you can find statistics that attest to contradictions between democratic nations and their supposed democratic ideals of equality of opportunity, justice, and freedom. In America, the land of the free and the land of the brave, you also have a huge wealth and race disparity. Can you be called free when your race impedes the path to success? Can you be called free when your wealth, or lack thereof, influences the quality of your education? Is this what justice looks like? Democracy, even in a very functional state, fails because its reality does not match its theory. This is not to say that democracy is without its successes. It may advance only to collapse, but it does not advance and it does not collapse in the same way. The effects of past advances and past collapses can provide context for future advances and future collapses. In a sense, democracy might be viewed as 2 steps forward and 1 step back. It is also an unfinished process. Before I continue, though, I think it is important to address the issues surrounding the concept of democracy. Some are satisfied with the literal definition, which is rule by the people. Others are satisfied with the definition of democracy entailing free and fair elections. Freedom House, an NGO which publishes reports on levels of freedom and democracy in the world, operates closer to this definition, reporting that close to 3/4 of the world is on its way to being or already free, a category which includes democratic ideals as part of its evaluation. Although democratic ideals may be the same in theory, their manifestations in reality are quite different. This is not necessarily bad or good, it just means that a country's history, its historical context, is manifested in its political framework. For example, the democracies of the US, Sweden, and Italy are comparably different. For now, democracy, where it exists, functions well enough, and I say well enough because it isn't ideal. This isn't to say that we should strive for an ideal in its whole sense, but more to say that there is room for improvement. You may have heard of the Arab Spring. This democratic movement, which spread to many Arab countries like Tunisia, Egypt, Yemen, and Libya in 2011, gave hope to many people, both throughout the world and within these countries experiencing these revolutions. And this was because the Arab world was finally moving towards democracy. Why is it that this was looked upon so positively? Is democracy so good that its arrival should be celebrated? I think the aftermath of the Arab Spring may shed some light on this. Despite the long-awaited movement for democracy in the Middle East, largely looked forward to by Western powers, the aftermath has not been promising. Initially, there was joy, elation, happiness, and excitement. Long-established illegitimate regimes, like Mubarak's in Egypt, were toppled by the voice and the power of the masses united. Yet a book titled Diaries of an Unfinished Revolution, which contains diary-like entries of people who were personally related to or involved in these revolutions of the Arab Spring, speaks well to the declaration that democracies advance only to collapse. The word unfinished in its title explains perfectly the failure of the Arab Spring. Although it began, it never ended. Following the excitement of revolution and the excitement of ousting long-established oppressors comes what? Very little in the case of the Arab Spring. Egyptians were able to vote in an election for the first time and voted in the Muslim Brotherhood. Yet only 2 years later, a military coup occurred and now Egypt has barely advanced. Other countries haven't fared much better. Why? Partially because true democratic reform requires a political foundation based on the internalization of emancipative beliefs. And this needs to happen not only among the elite, but most importantly, among the people. This is an issue visible not only in the far-off Middle East, but right here at St. Olaf, where SGA, a college-level political organization, isn't taken seriously by many students. Democratic values need to rise organically. They cannot be imposed from higher up or from outside. The Arab Spring was a noble attempt in the right direction, but a revolution in and of itself does not provide enough of the foundation necessary for continued progress towards democracy. Democratic reforms cannot be successful when the movement for them ends with regime change. Yet this is what happened in the various revolutions of the Arab Spring. Perhaps this view comes across pessimistic, but I do not think that it is. It is pessimistic if the failure of democracy is equated with the failure to create a democratic regime directly out of the ashes of a newly toppled regime, or if the failure of a democracy is equated with the failure to implement long-standing and effective democratic reforms in a state that has little to no history to support such political endeavors. This is to be disappointed in a collapsing building built on sand. Instead, democracy should be viewed as a tool and as a step in the historical process of a political evolution, not an end goal. So, the success of democracy should be judged rather in its ability to get something done than in the ridiculous goal of establishing a theoretical ideal. Viewing democracy in this way and comparing it to other options existing right now, it may be the best answer for now. To paraphrase Winston Churchill, democracy is the worst form of government except for all the others. It is currently the most functioning form of government, and I say this because democracy necessarily entails a rule of law. A rule of law indicates that a government is accountable to its people and that the people are accountable to the government. A deliberative relationship necessary for any state to be considered legitimate and representative of its people. An important step towards a functioning state and perhaps a better functioning world. Obviously, the world right now is not entirely democratic, and I don't know if it ever will be, but for me, this is okay. Even though democracy advances only to collapse, collapse does not entail failure. Something is gained from each cycle of advance and collapse, and although a state may return to illegitimate forms of government, it does not return to the same ground as before. This cycle of advance and collapse seen in democracy should not be seen as bad or good per se, because this cycle is a process of incremental progress. If you look back in time, you'll see that the world has come a long way. And taking this observation and applying it to the future shows only one thing: there is something more. Although democracy is the focus of our present and is the political ideal of our generation, as our reality right now, it is only the beginning of the future. Who knows what comes next? I just know it's not democracy. Thank you.